Sales Babble is sponsored by Outreach and its intelligent virtual assistant, Kaya, and Vidyard, a video solution for sales professionals. This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 379, How to Win Government Deals Fast, with Jack Sinney and Steve Bryan.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And did you know that 90% of the government purchases are no more complex than a regular B2B sale? In this episode, Jack Sinney and Steve Bryan visit from the Govcast. They're here to share advice on how to find, meet, and close government organizations that need what you sell. It's not all RFPs and government red tape, just the opposite. Today you're going to learn how to win government deals fast, efficiently, and successfully. But before we do that, here's a word from our sponsor. No matter how well prepared or experienced you are as a seller, customers will catch you off guard, and you have split seconds to react. Unlike traditional conversation intelligence tools, Outreach Kaya is changing the game with true conversation intelligence in real time, giving you exactly the information you need to handle anything that gets thrown at you. Say a prospect asks you about a specific product that just launched, that you're personally still learning the ins and outs of. Kaya hears this question and automatically displays a content card with all of the information you would need to sell that new product right there. Schedule a demo at click.outreach.io/salesbabble-Kaya to see for yourself and watch those deals stack up. That's click.outreach.io/salesbabble-KAIA. Are you ready to babble?
Yes, yes. Thanks, Pat, for having us. Yes.
Yes, I am.
First off, I should say that I want to thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the Govcast. What was that, about 3 weeks ago, I think it was? And we had a great time talking about government sales.
Top million LinkedIn Live. That's what we always kid about. Big things happening over there.
Yep, every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time.
So what is the Govcast?
Folks love to talk about the government, Pat. They love it.
We're talking about the government. So why don't you explain to the listeners, what is the Govcast?
Sure. So it's on LinkedIn Live. It's Steven mentioned it's every Wednesday at noon, and it really is just when we started it, especially when COVID started, a lot of folks wanted to start looking at selling to the government and how could they do it, and there's a lot of mystery behind it. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that today, and so we wanted to just put some stuff out there for free, and LinkedIn Live made it just more simple to start versus kind of starting a podcast. So we got into that. We do it every week, and we bring folks both from the government world and from the sales world, and we try to add some levity to it because government can be a little boring and dull. And so we try to bring a little levity and fun. But the main thing is we want to tell folks how easy it is to go win government business, much more than they think. So, Steve, I don't know if you want to add on to that, but that's really the target.
Well, there's that stat, only 10% of the companies out there in the United States are actually selling to the government. But the other 90% could be selling to the government. They just don't know how. So our big mission here is to educate the market on here are the barriers to entry, because there's a lot of myths out there and misconceptions, which I'd love to get into later. But it's not as hard as you think. You don't have to wait 6 months to a year to get your first deal. You can literally win a government deal in days. And that's why we're out there, doing the Govcast and our webinars, just to educate the market on, how to make it easier for them.
See, I'm really skeptical about all this because I used to sell to government. I'd love to have you. I sold to schools, and they only bought like once a year, July.
Yeah.
So you had to queue up all your deals, from August up, and then hopefully, that they would pop come July.
Yeah.
So, and if they didn't pop for one reason or another, because there was changing of the chairs of who's superintendent and who's not, then it got pushed out a whole nother year.
Yeah. Well, I think, listen, I think for your audience, I would just say Some of that's true. And I think anybody that's in the education space, particularly now, if you watch the last 3 stimulus package, it has a ton of money. You brought up schools for the schools, and they are going to be so on the forefront of technology and spending. The schools are going to spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars. But you are correct. A lot of that kind of happens during the summer, once the school year's over, because they want to get everything queued up. But whatever it was historically and kind of those numbers, it's going to be literally 3 to 5x the next 90 days. If anyone out there is looking at or has a product schools could use, it's going to explode over the next 90 days. They have a ton of money they have to spend as part of the stimulus packages. So
that's really true. Even my wife's school district, they got a leaky roof they've been farting around with for like 5 or 6 years. They're finally taking action on that now because of that money.
Yep. Crazy.
American Rescue Plan Act that's being passed. I just read that West Virginia is spending something around the neighborhood of $58 million for broadband connectivity to get it to more remote areas. And they're just using that because when everyone had to go remote, staying connected was one of the most important things. So it's good to see that those funds are being used in that type of way to help bring people together.
So how is government selling different from a regular B2B sale?
Steve.
Yeah, I will take that one. I've been on both sides of the coin there. So sales of sales, right? Let's address that first. And most of your audience, is probably in the private sector just by the stats. 90% of people who are selling to the private sector. But you have to always uncover the pain, solve a problem. And cities, counties, schools, any type of government agency are faced with challenges every day. Maybe it's getting a roll of toilet paper on the roll in the bathrooms, or it could be something as building new roadways and everything in between. We always say here at our company, it's from paper clips to battleships and everything in between. So if you have a product or service, the government buys it. But as far as the differences when you are selling to the public sector versus the private is the public sector has a little bit more red tape to go through. Just to be in compliance, they are spending taxpayer dollars, so they are entrusted with our own money, and they just want to make sure they're doing the right thing. Because if something goes wrong, of course, they're going to be holding it at the end of the day and have to say, okay, this is the reason we made that decision. So there's different ways that they go about the purchasing process, but I see it similar in the private sector too. We'll just use construction companies, for instance, or if you're going to get your car repaired. If you get a little accident, you shouldn't just go to the first auto body shop and take their quote, because you want to see what the other auto body shops have to offer as well. So you have to get a tail right place or a ding out of your bumper. You get one quote for $100, then the next place, it's like $200, and the other one is $300, and you say, I'll take the $100. Maybe it's quality work, but you don't know. You're based on price. So similar in the public sector is they go through a bid and RFP process. And I think that's what a lot of people are familiar with. It's just that structure of taking the time to review that 6 months to a year where they have to evaluate it. But then there's these other ways that government buys. I don't even think the market's aware of, like spending on a credit card. Government calls it a P card, short for purchasing card. And it's the same transaction where we say you can get deals in days, and that's living proof. Or if it's under a certain threshold, discretionary spend, or if you're on a contract. So there's a lot of different ways the government buys. And I think there's similarities, overlap. So if you're in sales and you have a product or service, it's just about knowing how to walk the walk and talk the talk, just like any other industry.
How would you find these? Let's say I'm that roofer, and I do business roofs, on commercial properties. How would I even know that a municipal building or some government building needs a new roof?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I think everyone, when they think about the government, says, oh, I'm going to go out and get a bid and RFP. I want to win a bid and RFP. And there certainly are the norm when you hear about government is let me go get a bid and RFP service. So that's some service you buy that kind of aggregates all of the bids and RFPs from the different agencies. They'll put them on their websites and they'll aggregate them. But I would just say for anybody that's new to the market, a lot of those are already baked. Normally the agency already has some idea who they want to use when they put out that bid and RFP. And so one stat for your audience, it's people don't believe it when we say it. Listen, 80% of government spending doesn't go out to bid and RFP. So I just want to repeat that 80% of government spending does not go go out to bid an RFP. And I think to piggyback off what Steven said, I think sales is sales, and you want to approach a government agency like you would a private entity. Like in your roofing example, almost every building needs roofing, and there's some time period, if it lasts, 7, 8, 9, 12 years, where you as a company want to market, just like you would to a consumer or a business, to the government. Because I'll just say the government has more money than any prospect you're chasing today, spending $7 trillion a year, which is $20 billion a day. So we encourage folks to look at the government market very similarly and do the same marketing activities you would in the private sector to the government agencies. And a lot of times they'll find a way around the bid and RFP process to use you as a vendor. You want to build relationships. We all know in sales, people buy from people they like. Same thing on the government side. Create a relationship. They'll find a way to buy from you outside the bid and RFP process. That's what we encourage folks to do all the time.
This is really great advice. This is really great advice. Most of the business I got selling to schools was like this. Every time there was an RFP, I rarely ever went them. In fact, I felt like I was used when it got all done.
True.
They just wanted to prove they were doing due diligence.
Right. What happens, folks don't realize when a purchasing, if just to look behind the curtain, ahead of purchasing, pick a city or a county or wherever you're targeting, right? They're responsible, as Steven mentioned, for spending all the taxpayer dollars. And so they want to use companies they know and trust. It's about trusting them. And so you reaching out to them as a person, just like you would in a private industry, and creating a relationship, when they need your widget, they'll be like, oh, Billy or Susan, I love them. Let's get them this deal, right? And again, there's about 10 ways the government buys outside the bid and RFP process that they'll find a way. Typically, if they love you and love your product, they'll typically try to steer you in that direction, and not in an unethical way, but just a way to be like, hey, we want to use this vendor because we know they do good work, we trust them, and they're going to do a great job for our citizens. So that's out there is really the number one way that agencies want to work with vendors that they know and trust.
I like that. So where do people screw up when it comes to selling a government? What are some common mistakes that people make?
Well, I think, we're touching upon it, is they just subscribe to a bid and RFP service, and they think that deals are going to flood in and they're going to make a bunch of money. But, the truth is you have to get ahead of that process. You have to get your foot in the door and have them write specs or something unique that your company offers to eliminate that competition. Because if you're just sitting behind your desk, I call it the reactive approach, and you're just responding to opportunities. Well, if that's baked for somebody else, you're not going to win. And you spend countless, hours, months, figure out all your time and energy. And then at the end of the day, you don't win. So I think that's the biggest mistake, Jack. I don't know how you feel.
No, I agree. Folks go out and buy a bid and RFP service, or they get on GSA schedule, right? They get on GSA schedule or a state schedule and be like, well, now I'm on schedule. Deals will just come raining down to me. And it's just not that way. Yep. And so just encourage folks. The number one thing, if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, is you should look at government agencies very similarly to how you look at private industry. Biggest prospect in the world. They buy everything. They always pay. And spend some time and money marketing to them just like you would a private entity. And our experience is you're going to be shocked at how quickly and how much money can come from the government market.
How is it different then? I think that's what I'm trying to dig into here. Sales Babble is sponsored by Vidyard. Vidyard is an easy-to-use yet powerful video solution that makes it simple to create videos, host them ad-free, share them with others, and track their performance. Whether you're recording a video for one person or sharing it with the world on your website, it's easy to manage your video content. Vidyard's solution is built for business with robust analytics, integrations with top enterprise tools, and customization options that answer businesses' unique needs. But you may be asking yourself, what's this got to do with sales? Well, with Vidyard, you can differentiate your emails by putting a face to a name when prospecting, following up, and demos. You can use the same CRM and outreach tools that you use every day to build content the entire sales team can leverage and track analytics to know which videos convert best. Sign up for a free Vidyard account today by going to vidyard.com/babble, and as a bonus, get their high conversion virtual sales playbook. Again, go to vidyard.com/babble. That's BABBLE. How is selling to government different than selling to private companies?
I guess I would give you two things. I know Stephen hit on one earlier. I think as a concept, you want to remember that government agencies are risk adverse, right? Opposite of sometimes maybe in the private sector, they're not rewarded for taking big risk, trying really new things. And so you want to try to make, when you're working with them, as easy and as guaranteed as possible, right? So we just encourage folks to a lot of validation, a lot of references, a lot of, hey, this is a no-brainer. This is going to be great for you, right? And then I think secondly, Stephen mentioned on the government side, they're going to have a process. However, one of the 11 ways they normally buy, they choose. You just want to make sure that you help them follow those rules and regulations, right? So once you go through the normal sales stuff and now they go, yep, I want to work with your company, then they're going to bring up to the forefront, hey, here's how we'll do this, whether it's on a P card or discretionary spend or sole source or whatever it would be. And just making sure that you help them facilitate the right processes and paperwork. Because again, it's your taxpayers' money that they're spending, but a lot of it is very, very similar. In the private industry, I would just say it's like, we've all dealt with this. If you go win an enterprise deal and it goes into legal, like that's the worst thing you want to hear in sales. Oh my gosh, it went to legal. And you're like, oh, we're screwed. That's a month. Similarly, in the government world, they have some processes, but I think it gets, just being super open, I think a lot of government consultants, government experts try to make it sound worse, so you hire them, right? And so we've been trying to shine the light on that because it's like, it's very similar to when you deal with an enterprise account and there's lawyers and there's paperwork and you got to get some approvals and what have you. Same for the government. And so just encourage folks to remember they're not profit motive. They're not very, they don't want to take great risk, right? So make it easy. Make sure you're going to add great value to them and their organization and try to guarantee it as much as possible. And once they decide how they're going to buy whatever you're selling, help facilitate that. Like get them the paperwork they need, give them the validation for sole source, help fit within maybe some either P card or some discretionary spend limits. So just make sure you're facilitating that. And then once you're in, typically it explodes. Once they know you and love you, then they'll kind of do references for you. They'll help grow your account. Those things are super important.
You mentioned sole source a few times. Maybe you could define that.
Yeah, I can actually jump in here. So sole source is something unique that is only you can offer. No one else offers it in the entire world. You are the only source to buy it from. So let's just say I am a lab scientist and I create the invisible ink and no one else has the invisible ink. So therefore my product invisible ink is sole source. In technology, we're seeing this happen a lot now. A lot of companies are coming out there. They have great algorithms or something unique or proprietary. Now that can be sole source as well. And the sole source certification process is a self-certification process. So you'll go out there in the market, hop on the Google machine, do your research. And if you don't see anybody else that offers it, pretty much you're going to be sole source. So I would go with full confidence to create a letter, which is a one-sheet PDF that you can provide to your agencies and say, look, I've done my diligence. Even if you put this out for bid in RFP, there's not going to be any companies that respond because there's nowhere else to buy it. And I think that's the true meaning of sole source is you're the only place to get that product or service.
So we sold software, software as a service product. We're the only ones that sold it. We're the only ones that had exactly that piece of software because we wrote it. So when people said, is this sole source? I'd say, I always saw it. Absolutely. You can't go anywhere else to get this.
Yeah, amen. It's so funny. Like people feel like the agency will validate its sole source. And the reality is, again, behind the scenes, behind the curtain, they'll normally ask the company, they'll say, hey, are you the only provider? And they'll be like, yep, here it is. Here's my sole source letter, or here's my patent. And I think the example Stephen used, those are really obvious. You're doing some cutting edge stuff, or Pat, when you said, hey, we had a piece of software. But I also want to tell your audience, it could be something as nuanced as you're the only a vendor that's able to provide 24/7 support because you're headquartered, within an hour away. Or there's a myriad of things you can do from a service side that could be, hey, we're the only vendor. Or maybe you wired the building and where all the wiring is. Hey, we're the only folks that can kind of service this. So it's not always so cutting edge technology. You should think creatively like, hey, we're the only folks, blah, blah, blah. And so it doesn't have to be this amazing strategic, ultra patented thing, but it can be sometimes a service. So encourage you to think about that, because I just want to say this totally true. Again, no one that works for the government. The government doesn't want to do the 6 to 9 month RFP process, nor do you. So everyone's looking for a way to avoid it, right? So they're going to go down the list and be like, can you do a sole source? Can you piggyback? Do you have a P card? You know what I mean? Like they want to go down the list because everyone wants to avoid the painstaking process of going out to bid typically. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
True. It's a nightmare.
Painful for the vendors to fill out the paperwork just as much as the agencies to write it.
Right. I mean, if you go look at the contract, there'll be protest. I mean, it's like you look at that big DoD contract, and folks were looking at kind of the DoD was looking at putting some of their stuff on the cloud, and so I mean, it's like literally billions of dollars. And like when they pick a vendor through a bid RFP, it's not like the other vendor goes, okay, I guess I lost, I'll move on. No, they want to protest and call their lawyers and get lobbyists involved. So it's not like the bid RFP process is a smooth thing that, once we do that, everything's hunky-dory. It's not. And so, again, folks want to find a way, hey, how can we get this done in an efficient, fair process? Again, nothing unethical, not trying to, go around any laws, but hey, within our infrastructure, how we're allowed to purchase per our city or municipality guidelines, how can we get this done?
I wonder if we could wrap this up with a story. Do you guys have a client, or maybe it was a guest on the podcast or on your live stream, I should say, or maybe personally a deal that you guys worked that is that the audience might enjoy hearing, a win?
Go ahead, Steve. You know what I'm thinking about. Go ahead, do it. Yeah.
No, which one? I was going to tell about the first state contract I won. Which one were you thinking?
No, do that one. Go ahead, do that one.
The one about Maryland, or?
Yeah, go.
Okay, so not knowing government business at all. This is previous to joining GovSpend, GovSales University, and meeting Jack. I was working up in New York City, and it was around 2008, 2009, and the boss said, "Hey, no one's getting raises or promotions at the job." So I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I love nature, especially water sports, paddleboarding, kayaking, and my family and I always travel to this area in Maryland called Ocean City. And a little bit south of Ocean City was an island called Assateague. Beautiful area, uninhabited.
I've been there.
Oh, you know it.
The ponies.
Yes, paddle with the ponies was my slogan. So fast forward, I was just, trying to get a government contract, not knowing how to get a government contract. So what I did was I called the State Park Service at Assateague. And I said, hey, they're actually divided by two. The land, half is owned by federal, half is owned by state. So I called both. The federal, a lot harder to deal with. So anybody out there trying to sell with the government, do not sell to the Fed. Well, start selling to the feds. It's just a lot more work that goes into it. But with the state agencies, they were very accommodating. And I said, well, what do I need to do to create this? And they said, well, listen, there is a husband and wife, the retirees. They have the concession stands on the beach right there to provide, ice, trinkets, hats, suntan lotion, and some food. And under that contract, they can also offer water sports. They just don't choose to take on that liability. They said, we can give you the name, phone number of that couple. I called them up, drove from New York down to Maryland and met with them. And they were open to my idea. I took away a lot of the risks. So I was technically a subcontractor at that time, because it was a trial run. I had to prove to the agency that this is something the guests would like to enjoy. And there was like 1 million visitors that go there and put up some signage. And then after that, they said, oh, well, this is a great idea. So the State Park Service put it out for bid. And I said, wait a minute, I just did all this work. Now you want to put it out for bid? They're like, don't worry, Steve. I don't know, hush, hush, kind of like, it's geared towards you. We're just following procedures. Put your name in the hat and you will be the winner. And then I awarded a 3-year contract where a percentage would be paid. And that was my first endeavor working with the government. It turned out to be a great experience and I loved it. But we have other clients that have happened too. So I just share that personally because it means a lot. It's true to my heart. But there's stories. I think the first one was GovSales University.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, well, we were on a podcast too. Trying to think of it. Brad Lee dropping bombs, and our phone rang, and I was talking to a 23-year-old guy. He was a truck driver, and he was like, "Hey, I'm listening to this podcast. I want to start selling the government. I don't have a business. I don't know what to do." And we're like, "Okay," trying to figure out, well, what connections do you have? Do you have an aunt, a cousin, a brother that is in a certain industry? Because we could start there, because at least you could have a product or service to supply. And he's like, I really don't know. So he was talking about this movie War Dogs, where people were like, oh, you can be a middleman. I think in that movie they were doing ammunition and arms for the federal government.
That's a fun movie.
Oh, yeah. That's what everyone always asks. He's like, are you in War Dogs? Right.
It's so funny. Yes, exactly. It's the War Dog scenario. They do some things in there that are a little bit unethical, so don't follow their playbook. But using the premise of being a middleman is definitely a good business. So what he did, registered for GovSales University, took our training program, and then started applying those principles into the market. Literally 3 days later, I just do a little weekly check-in. I said, hey, how's it going? I followed up with him on 7 days. But he said after the third day completing the program that he won his first deal. And I said, you're kidding me. I said, this is great news. I'd love to get the testimonial, of course, because I'm all excited here. He's like, yeah. I'm like, tell me how it went down. He's like, Steve, I did your first thing. He's like, I called the agency. I said, okay, great. And then he's like, I found out what their P cards spend. So that's a little mystery number that is not publicly available, only through conversations. And he said, it's trying to figure out what they need. And they needed something along the lines of ball bearings for the public works. So what he did was called up all the local vendors around that agency. I think he was in Seattle and the agency was in Virginia. And he called around and got quotes from all these ball bearing dealers and then put his little markup and percentage, called back the agency, submitted his pricing. And they're like, great, you won. And he got it. And it was just him putting himself out there that helped him win that deal. And I just love that story because he didn't have a product or service, didn't have a company. He's like, Steve, I didn't even know how to take a credit card. He's like, I had to register for Stripe or PayPal, one of those services. And he's like, literally, I got the payment the same day that they awarded it. And so it's just a great story to show, okay, you can win deals in a couple of days instead of 6 months and a year, which is what everyone else thinks.
Well, this is a great segue then. If people wanted to look at your live stream, watch it, subscribe to that, or to your university, where's the best place that they could go to find that?
So for LinkedIn, Jack Sinney is go to his account and you can tune in. You'll get a notification. But if you are interested in taking the education, just go to govsalesuniversity.com, GOVSALES, university.com, and you'll be able to check out some overview of the products and even schedule a free consultation. We want to make sure people are comfortable, and we'll spend 10, 15 minutes. We'll look up government opportunities for your industry because, again, they buy everything. So no matter what it is you sell, we'll look up some opportunities for you and, help you get started, because once you know how to do it, it's like second nature, just like going to the public sector, just knowing what to do, how to say it. And there's a lot of sales and marketing coaches out there. We just focus on the public sector.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you stopping by and babbling here on Sales Babble and cutting through some of this government red tape.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having us. Yeah, could not encourage folks more, particularly now post-COVID. There is a ton of money out in the government sales world, and especially with the stimulus package, again, the government's spending $20 billion a day. There's not a larger prospect. Whoever you're chasing, you're not spending that much money. So it's worth listening some time and effort. And today, I just want to reiterate, it's happening a lot faster than you hear. The myth is like, 9 months from now. It's not true. And so just encourage you to reach out. We can actually help you do some of that. So thank you so much.
You guys are great.
Appreciate it, Patrick. Nice babbling.
Great babbling. To connect with Jack and Steve and to listen to their live stream, the Govcast, you can find links to that in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com, as well as links from our sponsor, Outreach and its intelligent virtual assistant, Kaya, and Vidyard, the video solution for sales professionals. If you have any questions or comments, reach out and connect by clicking the Babble Me button on Sales Babble. If you've not done so already, like, share, and subscribe to the pod and never miss an episode. Until next Tuesday, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.